Welcome back to Ile Wara, the podcast by Bamishila Private Equity. This is season 2, where we will be bringing more topics at a more consistent speed of flow. The Ile Wara podcast is meant to discuss deals within Africa and topics that relate to private investment or investment in Africa in general, to get us to a place of where we see the future that we want for our lovely continent. Ile Wara in Yoruba means the land of milk and honey, and the idea again is that Africa is the true land of milk and honey. Africa is self-sufficient, can feed itself and provide everything that it needs for itself if we realize and understand the value that we hold. And we use our talents, both those from the diaspora as well as those on the continent, and uplift ourselves. The world needs Africa, and Africa doesn't really need the world. So, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the price of billions. And the idea is to rethink value, inflation, and understand as well the effects on human progress. This is a conversation that I, your host, Olayemi Bamishile, started on my LinkedIn feed a couple of days or weeks ago. And so, to give you a quick synopsis into the beginning of this conversation, to me, I was thinking a few weeks back about billion-dollar valuations. I have worked in several American institutions where I see deals, and because I work in the financial sector, I have seen deals that were in billions of dollars or almost to billions of dollars. I've seen conversations and been a part of conversations where we're talking about things in the billions of dollars. And it just dawned on me one day that where have we gotten to that all of a sudden everything is now in the billions of dollars, and where are we going to get to in a couple of years? Is it going to be that now we're going to have deals that are in the trillions of dollars? It just seems like things are getting far out of hand and out of reach, and there has to be a human cost to that. So that is what sparked this conversation. And so, to give you a quick intro to the beginning parts of this conversation before we dive into the second half, to me, it's striking, like I said, that in today's world, we just casually attach the word billion to projects, to companies, and even single transactions. So, for example, a tech startup becomes a unicorn when it's considered to be worth billions of dollars, for example. Or you have infrastructure plans, defense budgets, energy transactions, and these things are all measured in billions of dollars and even sometimes in trillions of dollars. And it seems like we have just normalized this level of inflated valuation that most of the world can't really comprehend. In countries like America, maybe this type of conversations make sense. In places like the UK, maybe some of these conversations make sense. But for African economies or other parts of the developing world, does it really make sense that they should also be measuring deals in these same inflated billions and trillions of dollars? You know, these are not abstract. This is not abstract financial theory. So to me, it seems like it's an imposed reality. You have countries whose GDP may be between 50 to 100 billion, and those countries are forced to operate in a global market where Meaningful participation requires engaging in billion-dollar contracts, loans, and valuations. I mean, if you're paying attention to some of the news, you're seeing deals between some of the Arab nations and some of the African nations where they're doing these deals in the billions of dollars. And you're asking yourself, who is this benefiting? And does this make sense? Are we putting ourselves in economic slavery? Is what I'm thinking when I'm seeing some of these deals, at least on the surface of it. So in this environment, there's just this mismatch between global pricing and local realities, and it's not a simple inconvenience. It's a structural barrier to growth and then also to dignity. So I want to talk about inflation a little bit. So what is inflation? Pretty much at its core, inflation, here's one definition of it. Inflation can be described as a general increase in prices over time that erodes the purchasing power of money. But beyond just giving that simple definition, inflation is not about natural economics, and it's just really more about human psychology and institutional design. We understand supply and demand, but it is a man-made philosophy to say that I'm going to just, every year I'm going to increase the price of my goods by 3%. Is it really costing you 3% more to produce those goods? Or is everybody just a part of this cycle of saying we're just going to arbitrarily increase our rates in order to make more profit perhaps each year? And one of the ways to make more profit is to raise those rates. And at the same time, if company X increases the price that it's charging for its goods, then maybe the next company that's purchasing from them is also then going to raise their prices as well for the next end consumer. And it goes on, but it's not always rooted in something that's natural and really necessitates those increases. So the term inflation is thought to originate from 19th century economic thought, when central banks and governments began issuing paper money instead of using gold. So they were issuing more paper money than gold reserves could support. So inflation really just meant that they were inflating the inflation of the monetary supply, the money supply. And over time, the concept evolved into the modern idea of rising prices across an economy. But if we're being honest, like I said, inflation is not a law of nature. It's really a byproduct of choices that are being made by governments, by corporations, and other financial institutions about how to measure value and distribute resources and create artificial scarcity. So, for developed economies, here's why I think this is a problem. For developed economies, inflation is treated as a challenge. It's something that's being managed with interest rates, stimulus packages, with fiscal policy. But for Africa and other emerging markets, inflation is having a different meaning. It's felt in the price of food and medicine, transportation, and housing. Yes, that's felt in countries like America too. But because of the way that global trade is and the dependency and correlation that global markets have on each other, that's having a much more painful effect on folks that live in places in Africa and other emerging markets. So the cost of capital is globally benchmarked, like I said, in inflated billions of dollars. So smaller economies have to borrow and trade in the same inflated currency system. The result of that is developing countries inheriting a problem that they didn't even create. And what should be affordable investments in things like agriculture, energy, healthcare are transformed into these debt traps that are denominated in foreign currencies. And then this inflationary system of the West is bleeding into every corner of the globe, which is stripping nations of their sovereignty over this perceived value. And this is a very real thing. There are even discussions that I see happening all the time about debt that African nations are taking out with, some of the Arab nations or several nations, and some of the deals that African nations are doing. I think, like, if you use Nigeria as an example, there's debt that they have that is tied to oil production. And so if they're not able to pay those loans back, they sometimes use things like their oil as a way to pay back. And with FX and the fluctuation of value, sometimes that means that they're in this endless trap of owing unlimited amounts. Essentially, I'm just using the word unlimited, even though that's probably a bit severe, of oil that they have to continue sending out. And if you are using that oil to repay down your debts, then that's oil that you can't sell. That's oil that you can't use for whatever manufacturing purposes that you would want to use it for. It's oil that you can't use for purposes that may better the country. And so if you're in this debt trap where you're now using your natural resources to repay these debts, and these become an endless cycle, is that not economic slavery? Does that not put us in a place where we are losing ownership of our own resources? And if we don't own our resources, and we're also starting to lose ownership of our lands, that those are negative cycles that we need to take a look at. So conversations like these are very important. So to me, inflation and the way that it's being denominated in our discourse is not just an economic concept. It's a symptom of misalignments like the ones that I'm mentioning. And what we are inflating is not just currencies, but it's expectations, it's egos, and it's a disregard. To me, it's a disregard for collective well-being. So I do not think that the world needs more billions. I think what we need is to recalibrate value, what value actually is and what it means, and imagine measuring success in GDP growth or dollar valuations instead of measuring success in just profit alone or just GDP growth and billion-dollar valuations. I think we need to recalibrate and start looking for quality of life indicators, things like nutrition levels, literacy rates, clean energy access, affordable housing, and healthcare. If we recalibrate what we see as the metrics and the KPIs or whatever it may be for success, and get away from using lens that only feed things like greed, we can start to build a better world for Africa and other developing regions. And this would be a critical shift. Instead of continuing to play into these inflated rules of the global market, because what we're doing is we're risking permanently pricing out billions of people from basic necessities like water. God created water. There's an understanding it takes work to provide clean and safe water for people, but God created water. Man did not create water. So the fact that some people don't have access to that, those things are insane. But if we continue to create new frameworks for value that are grounded in human dignity instead of speculative finance, I think we do stand a chance of building sustainable prosperity that's accessible to create a better quality of life for more folks instead of focusing only on the upper echelons of life and these valuations continuing to move people out of that mid to upper echelon of life and continuing to siphon people down into, more despair. So that's an introduction to the topic here. What I hope to do is to continue to discuss this and spark some thought and spark some conversations. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thinking about profit. I'm simply just saying that profit shouldn't be the only measure of success. And we need to start thinking about the human cost attached to everything. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Please tune into other episodes. Once again, I'm your host, Olayemi Bamishila, here with Bamishila Private Equity on the Ile Wara Ati Oyin podcast.